Hello, everybody. I was dedicated to being on time this morning, and because this is the first one of 2021 where we're going to be talking about some really interesting things. I so loved the last one we did, and then we had a bit of a gap there. So, Happy New Year to everybody, and I hope that that you all enjoyed the holidays as best you could. So, we're just going live, as it were. It takes a few minutes to boot up and see where we're at. So, hello. So we are actually going live today I'm just doing the request here. Go live. There we go. Going live today with Flora Whitmarsh, actually, from Confidently Anxious. She is this lovely, amazing young lady. Hello, Flora.
Hello.
We can now see all her beautiful self there. And thank you so much for joining us, because I know this is your evening compared to my
No,
morning. But
no, that's okay. It's great to be here. No, I'm really excited.
well, I'm really excited too, because I mean, I'd only just started these, I think, as you know, before Christmas, and then we had a little bit of a break. So I was just kind of wishing everybody Happy New Year and saying hello and welcome to the very first one of 2021. So here we go. And it's a bit cold here too as well. So I'm going to wrap up. There we go.
Yeah. Well, Happy New Year, everyone from the UK.
There we go. And we do love the UK. Have you got any snow?
No, not well, in London, no. I think in Scotland there is, and a bit further north, but not for London. It either just turns into a muddy slush or just doesn't exist.
It does here. It always looks really pretty for about 5 minutes.
Yeah. When it's falling, it looks nice. Yeah.
And then it's gone. Oh my
Yeah.
God. Well, today, Flora she and her colleague have started talking about a lot about what anxiety is. And of course, I know that that's something that a lot of us experience, and a lot of us experience it and don't even know that we have it, but it drives a lot of our behaviors. So for me, I know that you can have anxiety in big ways and small ways. It can drive your behaviors in simple things like, I literally can't cook dinner unless the kitchen's clean. Well, that's just a little bit of anxiety.
Yeah.
But like experiencing a full-blown panic attack.
Mm.
And then I don't know about you, but I know that I have noticed personally with all my friends, colleagues everywhere. Hello, Frankie. Thank you for joining today, all you people. I've noticed that the pandemic, funnily enough, has really increased anxiety and given people anxiety when they didn't even know that they had it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like become a whole new experience for a lot of people. Absolutely.
No, I agree. So I have had experience with anxiety from one end of the spectrum to the other. You know, when I was really young, I had my first blown panic attack when I became a mommy, and didn't really know where that was coming from, but it came from a lot of stress. And then, of course, with a lot of counseling, I learned that actually at the end of the day, it was also something that came from a lot of trauma in my childhood.
Hmm.
Now, I know that you shared, and I watched your incredible, for one of your very first videos where you shared about anxiety and, you know, how it happens for a lot of people. And that was just really I just really admired how open you were about it all. But I too have experienced that, you know, like, and I think a lot of people don't necessarily understand in your 20s, in your 30s, where all of that is coming from.
Mm.
And it can definitely come from trauma, and it manifests in many different ways. So I was just really hoping that now that everybody knows that I've had anxiety, but it's true. And of course, I've learned
Mm.
to figure all of it out, and do have some, you know, difficult times, but some amusing times with it as well. And we're going to do lots of things. I hope we're going to have time to share some stuff about actually how you can manage it. I think actually, if you even have anxiety when you don't know you have anxiety is actually a really good thing as well. So can you share with us kind of where did you first start understanding what anxiety was for you? Does that make any sense?
Yeah, absolutely. That's really interesting, that one, because I would say in hindsight, as an adult now, I realize how long, and I don't want to use the word suffer because I think it's just to say that would always put a negative on it. It's just been part of my life since day one, as far as I know. And it took me so long to realize that I was an anxious person, or to understand therefore how to start managing it, or like you said, things or behaviors I can start acknowledging that trigger me, or ways I can react to help my anxiety. And it really wasn't, I would say, until 2021 that I fully acknowledged that it's something I should put more focus on or pay attention to. Perhaps if you'd asked, say, you when you knew me as a child, you probably would have said, yes, she's an anxious child. If you'd asked my mum, she probably would have said she's an anxious child. But I don't think it took me a long time to acknowledge that. And as you said, I think it is experiences. I think, again, reflecting, it's a particular point of contention for me is my family here in the UK. My biological mum and my stepdad, and then my sibling as well. And I think that has been a huge point of where the anxiety has come from. I think dysfunctional families and that kind of relationship is a lot of the a lot of the reason I'm an anxious person, I would say. But again, to not blame, because I think we're all shaped differently, we're all wired differently. But I can acknowledge that has been a huge impact on me as an anxious person.
Well, it's interesting that you should say that, because I never experienced you as an anxious child. I
Okay.
experienced child. So I think that this is an important thing, because I know that was my experience, and I saw that as kind of what I thought your experience was, and I could be wrong, of course, because I'm not you, but more that it was that my experience was that I was looking for safety. I wanted to try to make some sense and some safe feelings out of living in a very sort of unsafe, and I hesitate to say emotionally unsafe, physically unsafe in some ways, but chaotic. So I think a lot of my anxiety manifests as not wanting chaos, just wanting structure and things to make sense of it, so that I don't feel that sense of chaos that I did as a kid. Now with you, I just kind of felt more that you had to deal with a lot as a child, and maybe that was a similar experience, looking for that sense of safeness. Does that resonate with you at all, or not?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think, yeah, because again, it's all this adult and I think I'm speaking very much because I'm still going through the kind of analysis of my life at the moment. I'm not I think with you, and I admire it, is where you are now, to be able to acknowledge your experience, acknowledge your anxiety, and that's, it's always a lifelong process for sure. But I'm still in that very early stage of acknowledging actually that I went through a lot, and that I should manage the feelings I experienced, and the things I experienced I need to work through a lot of things. So I was still speaking very in the now. But yeah, absolutely. I think at the moment I realize the behaviors I encourage I just want to have fun, and I want to enjoy life, because I'm worried, and this is really loosely, like if I died tomorrow, I would be disappointed, because I'm not fully content with how my life has been. So I find myself now really working hard to be content and be happy and enjoy every moment and have control and calmness, and not animosity, not arguing, not screaming, just love. And I'm very obsessed with love. I'm very obsessed with being loved, and wanting to give love, because I want everyone to be like, that exists, and that's all we should have. We shouldn't have, anger and upset. So I think, yeah, I definitely, as a result of my experiences, strive to do the opposite in many ways, kind of like you do with your kind of control and calm. It is definitely the same in hindsight, for sure.
And I think the other thing that you just mentioned that I know for me is really, really even showing up now. So you're saying, yeah, I'm getting a handle on it now. However, you know what? It kind of shows up sometimes even later in life when you're not expecting it.
Oh yeah, no, it's a forever thing. That's not going away.
What? I'm having anxiety.
Yeah.
So now my point in all of that was, I think that I also really strive not to have people arguing around me. Sorry, it was paused. Somebody was trying to get hold of me. Because that makes my anxiety go up. I think what it does is it sort of triggers my body reaction. Now, this is the interesting part about me commenting that even later in life it's happened. What I've noticed is, this is kind of new, is that I cognitively get anxiety. I cognitively can tell myself, oh, that's just some anxiety. You've got to figure it all out. And, and I do self-talk, and I do lots of strategies. However, I can find myself in situations now where my body's telling me something different. So
Mm.
I feel my anxiety in my body in a big way, but my brain is telling me something completely different. Like I think I cognitively get it, I understand it, but my body's still reacting actually like I have PSTD, like post,
Mm.
syndrome, and PTSD. So it's kind of um, interesting, I think, later on, going through years of counseling, personally and professionally, um, but my body's telling me something different. So, have you had that experience as well?
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, no, it's an interesting one. It's like, yeah, you can, it's, I think with anxiety, it lacks logic. I think that is really what anxiety is. The world isn't ending, but inside you feel like the world is ending. And that is exact anxiety. You've submitted something late. No one's going to die for that, but you feel like you're going to die because you did that. And that
Exactly.
is the whole thing. I think it lacks logic. So yeah, I think pretty much every time that happens in many ways, because someone will be, that's hypothetically, shouting at me, and I can rationalize that this is stupid, it doesn't warrant an argument, it's just anger, yeah, it's not anything. But then I find myself coming back, I feel defensive and my guard goes up and I scream back, and before I know it, I'm like, I just saw red, and I'm like, and that's like my brain rationalizes that it's not a big deal, this doesn't need to happen, but before you know it, your body's reacted in a different way because it sometimes just takes over. And I think vice versa, where the brain reacts, you don't actually react to how you're actually feeling in the head. So I think, yeah, they can be disassociated in that sense because
Yeah.
logic doesn't always come in.
Well, I think that's the hard part is you're going along and you think you're fine, and all of a sudden you're having a full-blown panic attack and you don't really know why. And
Mm.
and it's not so, and it doesn't make sense, like what you're saying.
Mm.
So it kind of it's kind of for me it's kind of like, okay, when I try to get to understand it for myself, and I tell my clients too, before I get to that full-blown thing.
Mm.
So, and that's part of, I think, maybe managing it a little bit. I don't know if you
Absolutely.
but I love some of your ideas for managing it. So I'm just going to share a little bit of mine, and then I want you to tell about yours because you've been posting some
Mm.
really good stuff. In fact, I'd really recommend that you go and watch Confidently. I got it right this time. Confidently Anxious, because they've got the two girls have some really good ideas on how to, do this. I did have to start right back at the beginning. I remember when I was really young going, okay, wait a minute, this is just anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
And then use some of the techniques that you're going to tell everybody about. But the other thing is that I think was really valuable. In fact, I think it's really valuable is to go, wait a minute, what is that feeling like? And I feel it kind of in the middle of my tummy. I don't know where everybody else feels it, but that's
Mm.
what it is. What is it trying to tell me? Because there's huge amounts of good information in there. And
Mm.
with our anxiety. So, okay, it's only a feeling. And so if we think about that, and then it's an irrational, it becomes kind of your body reacts and you have no control over it. And then you want to try to control yourself. But it does make sense that an event happens, we think something about it, then we have a feeling about it, and then the
We
anxiety
react.
from that
Yeah.
action, right? And so the one thing that I found really useful for me, and I still use it, I mean, and sometimes still need to talk to my coach or my counselor about, how to do some of these things, because I do have trauma from childhood, and it sometimes gets triggered, like, a lot
Mm.
with anxiety. But is I try to go, okay, so what is that trying to tell me? Usually for me, I don't know if it's the same for you, but it means something's not working. Something's not right. I'm in a place where I don't want to be, and I need to do something about it. So it is kind of for me a little bit of a call to action to look after myself.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. So I would love to hear what you think about that, because I mean,
Yeah. Well,
every
they say actually, the origin of anxiety in like many ways is the fight or flight response. It's
mm,
just got out of hand. So in many ways, it is exactly what you need it to be. Like it saves you in moments of need when you're somewhere you shouldn't be, and that heart rate goes up and you get a bit hot or you get a bit clammy and shaky. That's to get ready to run away from the problem or the thing you shouldn't be. It's just when that goes out of proportion. So the problem's now gone, but you still feel rubbish, or um, you know Like, it's when it goes on too far and the rationalism's gone, that's when it's the problem. And I think, like you said, though, tuning in is definitely the way forward. Acknowledging it, ignoring it, and suppressing it is when it gets out of hand, because it will always try and burst through. And I don't think it goes away with suppression. I think it can be held off, but then this is what has a knock-on effect in your adult life or later in life, or as they say, you have kind of like a breakdown or something because it's suppressed. So I think with that is acknowledgement, 100%. And it can be the hardest thing to do, to acknowledge that what we label in ourselves as a problem, because, you know, we're imperfect. You know, to acknowledge that problem can be hard, but you have to kind of look in yourself and sometimes get worse before you get better, as I know a lot of therapist technique is, but, and I'm not sure your angle, but where, you know, you have to talk about those things and break into them and explore them, and that can be really painful, but with the outcome being better than where you were before. So with that, if you're not in a position to do therapy, or you don't want to, which is absolutely fine, is talking about it, I think, has been my biggest save. It took me until literally the last couple of years, and even this page was a huge, when I was talking to Naida about creating it, and I said to her, and she said the same, the biggest thing was we had to own it, and we had to speak about our problems. And the strange thing about that was that was hard. That's what we wanted other people to do, but we were worried that we wouldn't do it. So we were like, maybe we shouldn't even be, you know, doing this page. Well, I think I'm just going to check. Oh, have you come back?
I don't know. Yeah, here I
Oh,
am.
there you are.
Yeah, it was just, oh, and now you frozen. It's just doing little technical stuff.
That's
Anyway,
good.
no, and
Glitches.
I totally get what you're saying. Like, I mean, I think that that's a lot of people's experiences. And of course, I'd love to hear what everybody's saying below us as well. You know,
Yeah.
it goes up at the bottom, you know, what their experience is as well. And so I totally understand that it's a painful process. However, I find that with the conversation, whether it's for me or whether it's for somebody else, it's a process, and that we don't want to label anxiety as a problem. I call it my barometer. So when my barometer is telling me there's something going on, it means that I actually have to do some processing, which means journal it, or and these were the ideas that you guys have come up with, some great ideas in terms of how to manage it. So can you share some of those with us?
Yeah, so so the first one, like I said then, was talking about it. If you can find someone to talk about it. A second one is, even if you're not at that stage, and it sounds really cliche to say it, but journaling, and I'm writing it down in a diary on a piece of paper on the back of an envelope, because it has it's the outlet, it's the release that you need. And I think sometimes ranting on a piece of paper, and it doesn't even need to be an aggressive rant, like a rant as an expression of how you feel, a commentary, even a phrase, can be really helpful, because actually it's kind of the stepping stone into what me and Ida really push for, which is reason and logic, because I think that's where anxiety is really lost. It just has no rhyme or reason. So right
down below a whole bunch of levels, but
yeah,
there is some reason and logic, but it's kind of below everything.
yeah, there's reasons it happened, but the anxiety itself doesn't have its reason. I think it's because, for example, the trigger from your childhood isn't currently happening, and yet your anxiety is choosing to give you a panic attack or play up. And where is its reason? And yes, it's so deep, so you need to explore that feeling. But what you need to acknowledge is that in that moment you are fine, like you're okay, the world isn't burning, like you're still sat there. So writing it down, you write what you feel, and then before you know it, you're like, oh my god, this is so stupid. And like you'll get halfway through that paragraph, and I promise you'll already feel calmer, because you will just have enough reason, because your brain can see it.
You had some good ideas yesterday, I saw, and it kind of, those resonated with me a little bit about one of my own counseling sessions about you know, some stuff I was going through was focusing on, I can't remember what it was said. I wish it was right in front of me now, but you said focusing on, so even focusing on something in front of you.
Yes, yes, it's Naida's post. It was very good. Yeah. So
that was great, because she's on the call as well. And so,
yeah,
but focusing on the light and looking at it and going, well, what color is it? How warm is it? You know, trying to, and that brings the body down. So
absolutely.
so what else would you suggest?
Yeah, I would say definitely give focus on something. And our breathing is one. I wrote a blog on you can go to our website and read it. And it literally says just breathe. And it's, again, these are the simple ones. And the reason I use those is because you can do them anywhere. Like I said, back of an envelope for the writing, and the breathing you can do anywhere. And as much as we joke about picking up a paper bag, don't go and do that. But do like take just a deep breath. And the reason that phrase has traveled years of that, take a deep breath, which is most annoying when you're feeling rubbish and you're not feeling, and someone goes, just take a deep breath. And you're like, I know, but do try, because it really, yeah, the reason the phrase has traveled years and it is translated into a million languages of take a deep breath or chill out or calm down is because actually taking a breath does, like, you oxygenate your body. You really, and you have to take a minute to do it. You can't talk, you can't hyperventilate whilst you do it. You have to inhale and exhale. And weirdly, when you just stop fighting it and just do it, it's quite liberating, I'd say. So honestly, just breathe.
So yeah, so it's a really good physiological response that if you can actually tell yourself to do that, it alters the state of where your body's at, which has gone into the, as you say, the fight or flight response a lot in that moment. And it can be really, really difficult for a lot of people when they're right in the midst of still dealing with all the trauma. And like I said, it can show up later in life and you didn't even know that it was still driving your behaviors, and the way you think. And I find, a lot of times it's showing up right now. So I'm definitely going through, a heightened state of sort of kind of going, okay, well, wait a minute. Also because I'm isolated in the pandemic. I think that's causing a lot of, different reactions from a lot of people. I think that, anxiety is kind of a little bit more mainstream in a way, just sort of a globalized anxiety. I mean, we're talking about all the extremes in terms of of anxiety coming from a lot of different areas. But, in a generalized way, I think a lot of us are feeling, just generally anxious, living in the middle of really what is a very fearful kind of unsafe feeling. And that so Frankie's just saying something, tapping your wrist.
Oh yeah, pressure points. So anxiety pressure points. And they say there's several different ones and you can find them, but a lot of people say a finger here, like if you rest and just tap there. And I think, if you tap your wrist as well, that can be one.
Where on the wrist, though, would be interesting. Frank, so you just mentioned that. Where on the wrist, what should you tap? Like, is there a particular area? Because I know that tapping is something that a lot of people are using. I know some of my friends use it. I find that then I can't remember where I'm supposed to do it in the moment.
Yeah, I guess so. With all these things, you find what works for you, I think, and that's why you have to test the theories. It's why you have to try journaling once, try breathing once, try tapping your wrist once. And I found the post Naida did, it's name 5 things you can see. It's the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So name 5 things you can see, name 4 things you can hear, name 3 things you can smell, name 2 things you can touch, and name 1 thing you can taste. And if you go through that, it's just a calming method. And again, try it. Don't knock it till you try it.
Well, I thought it was brilliant, and the reason why is it brings you into the present, rather than in the traumatized past. Now, all of these things. So the one thing about anxiety that a lot of people don't know is, hi everybody who's joining. We're a little bit late. Oh, she says, you taught me that on different places. I don't remember teaching you that. Oh my God. Oh, okay. Well, I have to look that up again.
Everyone just tap and see what feels good.
Just tap anywhere. See how it feels. I can't remember Frank's. Oh, that's too funny. Anyway, and of course, Frankie, I don't know if any of you remember, but she joined us on the last call talking about creativity. So a lot of the things that that Flora and I are talking about, is diving into something that's creative or somatic, which is writing. That's a somatic thing, or an art thing, or something creative. Actually takes your brain and then focuses in a different way, and actually does the act of the processing without doing it in a talking way. And that can always be really helpful as well. So I was actually going to say something, but it kind of went out of my brain now.
Okay.
Maybe I'm feeling anxious. Who knows?
Yeah, getting nervous. I think with the coping is just to, and it's not to make it an exercise, but I think it needs to be acknowledged there's a fine line between in that moment just having a solution to get you through whatever you need to get through, and then actually working on your anxiety. Because there's one which is more of a distraction method just to move you off it because you need to get through this presentation, or you need to get that job interview done, or you need to go shopping, and social anxiety is not your thing. That social environments aren't your thing. So there's a difference, just getting yourself through it and then being like, right, I'm going to work on my anxiety a bit. And I think it's just acknowledging there's different exercises for different needs on that. You know, breathing's probably just to get you through it, and then journaling's probably more to work on it.
Absolutely, that's such a brilliant point, and actually ties into what it was I was actually going to say, which is that I have a firm belief. Well, I've studied interpersonal neurobiology. It's a hard one to say, but it's actually why all of these things actually work on the brain and the body, and how to change that state. And you know, I tell a lot of my clients, you know, when you've got PTSD or you've been in a trauma, you've experienced something that's been really life-changing for you in small or big ways, that the brain becomes wired like that. And so then our brains are wired against us actually really being aware and conscious of it, to fall into that, you know, fight or flight response, which causes so much anxiety, or just to be in that anxious state a lot of the time. So a lot of the things that you guys are describing, the solutions on all of that, also, you know, also help how the brain is wired, so we can actually change those synapses. And I think that can be really helpful to know that, well, wait a minute, you know, because we can, I don't know, judge ourselves. I know that I used to judge myself for feeling anxious or not coping, or to feel stressed. Well, like, well, what's wrong? There's nothing really wrong. I shouldn't be stressed. I knew I did that a long time when I was younger, a lot more. I don't know if you do the judging thing, but it's kind of helpful, I think, for people to know that, wait a minute, my brain's kind of wired like that way. That's where I actually need to do the work. And yeah, and then so some of the suggestions that you guys made the other day, and the one Naida did, you know, helps to change how the brain is wired in that traumatized state.
How it processes information in that moment.
Exactly, like EMDR does, like hypnosis does, like any of those somatic therapies we're talking about. Those are also solutions to go and work on your anxiety and the underlying issues. And then after you've gotten through them in the moment when you're having a panic attack or whatever. Or you don't want to get on an airplane because you might be claustrophobic.
I know all those. Yeah,
I know.
it's bad. I think yeah, and then, you know, with all of that, and you know, rewiring, one day you'll be in a situation that you usually find triggering, and you won't react the way you're used to, or you'll react what you would consider a better way.
Yeah.
And then the game is changed because you already are starting to reinforce now new responses, new behaviors. So you, as Naida always says, especially as she suffers with an eating disorder, and she always says you have to challenge yourself, because otherwise you just live the same way all the time. But you have to put yourselves in those environments to rewire yourself, and then you start reacting in new ways to situations, and that becomes the new way of living. But you can't just always protect yourself from it and just use coping mechanisms and never go out in those, or like, I don't like planes, so I'm just never going to go on one. You have to do it, and then one day you will go on a plane with no problems, and that is it. You're on a roll. So yeah, always challenge yourself and always put yourselves in the situations, because that's the way to move forward.
Absolutely. I totally second that. Well, that's actually a third. Yeah, I third that with the two of you. I totally agree, because I know that I used to have anxiety getting on an airplane. But after, like, you know, you've changed that behavior over time, and I have challenged myself, and I'm not going to stop doing it because I have anxiety. That's the big thing. I think that our lives can become limited. You're saying, like Naida said, if you don't challenge yourself and make yourself do those things, because you aren't going to die from them. And I think actually saying that, okay, I'm not going to die. This isn't life-threatening. It feels like it, but it's if you can do a lot of that self-talk, and I love the fact that, you know, challenge yourself, knowing that you're okay.
Yes.
You're going to be okay. That changes the brain. It takes a while. I know that some, you know, a lot of my clients and myself have gone, well, when is this ever going to get better? But it does take 21 times of doing something, just like setting concrete. It's the same thing. To change the wiring in the brain takes 21 times. And so I think that that's always good to know that stuff. When it's to, okay, wait a minute, I'm going to be okay.
Yeah, I think knowing there's never a finish line, unfortunately, to break it to everyone. There's never a finish line with anxiety, but there is like a really positive road once you start the journey,
Yeah.
because your life just gets, and this is, to be fair, we're probably talking, like you said, anxiety is a spectrum. We're probably talking more of the end of where it's really impacting your day-to-day life. But once you start the process of working on it, improving yourself and improving your anxiety around certain stimuli or situations, it really is a positive road, because you're going to make your life so much easier for the work you put in now, or more positive, or have better relationships, or more positive impact at work, or just happier day to day, or even and be as big or as little. But yeah, generally it's going to be a much more positive journey if you just tackle it head on.
Yeah, and that's when you're kind of aware of it. What's really interesting is because I deal with a lot of, anxiety with people,
Mm.
but it is interesting how I've really noticed that a lot of people have anxiety and a kind of and drives their behaviors, but they don't even know that they have that that's
Mm.
what's causing them to. Okay, let's run through a few of them. Need like people who are more OCD. I mean, that I don't like that, but really need a lot of structure, and they really
Mm.
want things to be a certain way. Well, interesting enough, that's driven by anxiety,
Yeah.
but people aren't necessarily aware of that. Like,
Mm.
have you noticed people having anxiety, but they don't even know that they've got it in
Yeah, I actually,
normal everyday circumstances?
yeah, and the things like I know there's a borderline between stress and anxiety. What some people think is anxiety is actually just normal stress. Like, it's normal to get stressed when your train's late, or it's normal to get stressed when you're running late. Those kind of things. And then people go, actually, it's because I'm really anxious. Fine line. But in other situations, like when you're always late for a train, why are you always late? And that can actually be a like a sign or a signal that actually it's anxiety about what happens if I'm actually really on time and I have to speak to someone when I get there, or what happens if I'm the first person there and actually I find out I'm in the wrong place. If I'm just late, at least I can just sneak in the back, for example. Or always procrastinating can also be anxiety, because the reason you're always scared of failure, so you just don't ever start. Where people just go, oh my god, you're just lazy. No, they're actually severely anxious, because they don't realize that the reason they're procrastinating is to avoid all the things they really fear, be it success, or be it not being good enough, or being commented on. And it's easier just to not do it and not participate than to get the feedback from participation. And that's a form of anxiety too. Like, I've got one friend in mind who, and she'll be laughing if she's watching this, but she always hands things in borderline, maybe late or just on time, does it about 24 hours before it's due, all the way through. She's doing her master's now. I can hear her laughing at me. And she does acknowledge now that she's an anxious person, and that was something we went through in uni together. But I think for a while you could just see it as procrastination and laziness, but people who actually know her, it comes from anxiety and fear of failure, or fear of not being good enough, fear of letting yourself down. So if you set yourself up to fail, you can't really let yourself down because you've already failed, kind of thing. And it's that kind of thing is quite common.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't necessarily delve that deep. Well, I have the opposite problem. I hate to be late because it
Mm,
makes my anxiety go up. I can't be late in case I am going to get lost or I get to
yeah.
work. And because there's this, but it's real anxiety. Like I literally can't stand being late.
Mm,
I will leave or start something way earlier than I need to just because I don't
yeah, overwork it. Yeah,
overwork.
absolutely. I was the same. I used to get so, and it's really a negative one. And I have actually, talking about working on things, is not letting myself get so upset about being late. I used to get really annoyed, really angry, like heart palpitations, and then so apologetic when I got there, when I was literally 10 minutes late, and no one really cared. But I cared so much that that was when it was becoming detrimental, because before you know it, you're stuck in traffic and you spend the whole hour just beating yourself up, like, why didn't you leave early? You're stupid, you're an idiot, they're going to fire you, they're going to do, and then that is not constructive, because it's not true. You're just telling yourself that. So, and that's something I've worked on, that now I'm still on time pretty much all the time, or early. But if I'm running late, it's really not a big deal. And I know it's not, but I do still struggle when someone else makes me late. I'm still working on that. I get quite angry with them.
I know.
It is your fault.
I get that. I totally get that. So the one thing I think that's just coming up for me when you were just talking with what you said now, and I think this might be true for me as well, is a lot of my anxiety. um, and and for others, not just me, but I think comes from a fear of also being judged. I don't know if
Mm,
it's completely being judged, but for me, it goes to because, being loved and appreciated is like one of my, main needs in the world. I think a lot of us like that, and safety is as well. Those are some of our main needs, as
mm,
but I think that a lot of my anxiety comes from literally a fear of people not liking me or people judging me or
mm.
I mean, from when what you were saying, because then I go
Yeah,
into like self beating myself up about things. Well, why did I say that? They're going to think I'm stupid, or
yeah,
I used to say it more than I do now, but it's totally true. So,
yeah.
what do you think about that?
I think that's so valid, and I do. It's funny because I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but I think my friends would say, "Oh, you're so chilled, like you just don't care what people think. You just, like you know yourself and you just get on with it." And I think I'm just at the moment on the fence with it. Like I am that, but I'm also this other person that does care a lot, does get upset if I heard bad feedback or heard something in the grapevine about me. But I am actually transitioning more because I've realized the benefits for me as a person of care. And I don't mean being careless, but caring less
Hmm.
about what people think. Knowing myself is, but it's less about them and more about the more I get to know myself and the more I love myself and the more I back myself, the less it matters what people think. So I'm able to start transitioning from that. But I would say, and maybe it was being bullied in school. I was never very popular in school. I was definitely like picked on a lot and talked about a lot. So I feel like that might be where it's come from. Is that familiar?
As your stepmother, I'm going
Yeah,
right.
excuse me. I'll give you their numbers. You can go round there, knock round some doors. But I think being perhaps spoken about a lot is something I do recall, and therefore caring what they thought. And that was obviously where we wouldn't care about what I say is different kinds of bullying. That was the kind of bullying I experienced, and I only cared because they were saying things that weren't positive about me. So I wonder whether that, in hindsight, is a knock-on effect. But I hope now that I'm transitioning more into the self-love stage, and I don't mean that in a pretentious way, I just mean it in a the more you value yourself and back yourself, the less it matters what people think. If you lose the job, you just go, well, it's not because I'm great and they've lost someone, but it doesn't matter. I'll find a new job because I'm good at what I do, or I'm good at this, or I'm good at that. Or a friend for some reason chooses they don't want to be friends with you anymore. That's fine. It's not an end of the world. I have other friends, or I can make friends. I'm a nice person. We just weren't a good match. Or same with relationships. So it's just like changing your attitude about yourself to be less impacted by what people say about you or feel about you.
Hmm. Sort of like the Toltec teachings, they're not taking anything personally. It
Mm,
kind of really helps to not take anything personally. It's really not about you, and
yeah,
then accepting that you're not going to judge yourself either, and I think that's true. I really think that the self-judgment though and anxiety could really drive a lot of different behaviors for a lot of people. I think
mm,
in different ways. I can imagine, and I know for a lot of people, and I think a lot of people, not just men and like not just women, but men as well, um, end up sort of becoming. I mean, I hate this term, but people pleasers,
mm,
as in not wanting to rock the boat, not wanting so to keep the peace, and
yeah,
which comes from their anxiety of needing safety, can then be really even more detrimental than just anxiety. And I think that then there's having to work through all of that stuff. So you were really right when you said, well, it's okay just to deal with anxiety in the moment. Here's a whole bunch of strategies, but it's really figuring out what's really driving that in the first place, and
and digging into that. Yeah,
digging deeper. And of course, we're talking about the emotional process in more than if somebody's got anxiety and depression because they've got a chemical imbalance in some way. Um,
yeah,
but even then, I've recommended to clients most of the time if they're on an antidepressant or something for anxiety and anti-anxiety, that they still have to do the work so that so that
yeah.
so that they can deal with it and not and then not be have to stay relying on drugs to do that. um,
Mm,
and I know that like in my own family there's a lot of anxiety from their own background as well. So
Yeah.
I totally get that, but I think a lot of it does come from this self-judgment thing. Now, Naida might have something to say about that as well, because
Mm.
that could lead into, okay, so now we're discussing that can lead into being a people pleaser, but all of that can start here at the trauma, lead to anxiety, and then you find a strategy to deal with that,
And
which
that's when it becomes toxic and
can
yeah, or can
eating disorder, or you
mm,
do addictions, or you take that
obsessive behaviors and yeah.
behaviors, and to find a strategy that's going to stop the feeling of anxiety.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think you're completely right. It is a judgment thing. I mean, they say that anxiety is shame. A lot of like books and articles say that anxiety is shame, and it's an interesting thought because then you ask, well, what is shame? And shame is a feeling of yourself, like feeling a judgment on yourself, and shame is based on, how other you think other people have made you feel or how you feel about yourself, just being shameful of feeling anxious, shameful of the way you look, shameful of the way you feel, shameful of your past. And that can be, yeah, it's completely self judgment. And it's interesting that you say, it leads to people pleasing behaviors, because I think of an example straight away, which is I lived in quite a highly anxious family, like anxious environment, a lot of tense, a lot of animosity, very dysfunctional, that I found myself trying to resolve that a lot as a child. I spent being the person who like calmed everyone down or cracked a joke to try and lighten the mood, or walked on eggshells, or tried to be to try and piece everyone a bit back together. That I did find a lot of my early adult life, a lot of my working life, especially with like senior management or whatever, of people pleasing, making sure they like me, making sure they're happy and they're calm and
Mm.
they're in a good position. Same with my friends. I'll put myself, like, they want to do X, Y, Z. I really don't, but I'll do it because I really just want them to be happy. As long as they're happy, I'll be happy. And you should never measure your happiness because other people are happy. So I think it's learning that, like, if I don't want to do that, it's fine. If I disagree,
Mm.
that's fine. If I want to say no, that's fine. So that's definitely, yeah, I'm definitely like a recovering people pleaser.
I
For
love that.
sure.
That is really brilliant, and I think a lot of people can really resonate. That will really resonate with them. I think that's really important, and I love that we are recovering people pleasers.
Recovering people pleaser. Oh my God, what do you on the list of what I'm recovering from? Again, it's a work in progress. Yeah.
Well, and you at your young age, I'm just admiring how wonderful it is for you to be able, in your mid-20s, to be able to, hi Christine, to be able to
Me too.
this stuff, yeah, to learn this stuff now, and then really, be able to live differently than if you discovered this when you were 60 or something like that. But I think the other really, really big point, and it kind of touches me quite deeply, I think, when you bring up shame. Now, I have not done a lot of studying and work on shame, but I had a counseling session myself around some anxiety I was having, and he meant shame, and I went, wait a minute, shame? I don't feel shame.
Yeah.
And when I did some studying on it, I went, oh, that is shame.
Yeah.
It's when I'm really judging myself for something that's happened or occurred. And of course, then that I can actually still feel it in my, right here, is that sense of what that was about. Always feeling like I was wrong, or I was bad, or I'd hurt somebody, or all of those, kind of wrapped up into this thing of shame. And I think, can you say a little bit more about shame? Because it's really something I'm just kind of learning about.
Yeah, that's a hard one, because I think when you mix a feeling with a physiological response, so like shame is the feeling, but anxiety can be, it's hard to be like, well, where is the connection there? And it's that whole mind body thing again, and it kind of nicely loops back to where we started. But it's why you have to, exactly what you said, you have to dig in there. You have to look at what it is that's brought you to that point of anxiety, why you suffer now, and not just coping, because it's more than just sweating and stomach aches or heart palpitations. It's emotional. It's a feeling that you're having about yourself. And the only person that can fix that is by going inside yourself and addressing how you feel about yourself. Because even if you took away a lot of the outside stimulus, that feeling of shame doesn't go with the people. The triggers might go, so you might actually ignore it for years and years and years. But the shame is because that's about you. No one can put that on you. So it's really rewiring how you feel about it. And that's when we go back to those stepping stones of talking about it, because I said in that video that you've mentioned, and one of the first lives we did, that I'm trying and working towards wearing my anxiety and my experiences like a badge of honor, because what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. And I'm proud of like where I am and where I've come. And it's taking away the shame of the experiences, the shame of how I've dealt with it, rightly or wrongly, and the shame of maybe how I feel as myself, if I'm more proud of how far I've come and owning it in that sense. So yeah, for the shame side, I would say it's really addressing how you feel about yourself, which obviously a lot of counseling and therapy, being it eating disorders or obsessive behaviors, is addressing how you feel about yourself and why you feel that way. Which is so much easier said than done, because you can ignore it for so long. You can really think it's everyone else's fault, or it's my dysfunctional family's fault. It's big groups that are my problem, or it's having a messy kitchen. That's the only thing that bothers me. Besides that, I'm literally fine. And it's take away all those things and it's still there. So it's really addressing that feeling.
Underneath, it's still there, and it's just going to sit there. Well, that's why it was such a shock. It literally was a shock to me when I was talking with this counselor, and I went, no, not me.
Because you like to back yourself. You're like, I don't feel shameful of myself. Yeah.
I know. And then I sort of looked at that and I thought, oh, wait a minute. Every event, I still was making up a story, whether I was conscious or not, about what that meant about me. So the one thing I'm learning, and I've learned in my whole life, is that when I feel anxious, or I'm in a thing with a person or relationship, because of course, anxiety is an interesting topic when it comes to relationships. But if I can look at that and go, wait a minute, what story am I telling myself about what that means about me? Because that happens. And that's probably one of the main points that we can say that I hope everybody can hear here is, when we're having an anxiety, when we're having a response, when we're now going to a strategy, we've made up a story about what something means about us. And that's why the Toltec thing about don't take anything personally. But the bigger part of that piece is that we are telling ourselves a story about what something means. What are we accepting that this event means about us? And I think that that's a really important point, so that if we can always at some point kind of take the unconscious, because it's usually unconscious, and bring it up into our conscious, that one piece, that can be unbelievably helpful in actually unpacking it all and then being able to let it go. So we can go like you're saying. And I do see a huge difference in you going surviving as a child in a lot of chaos, trauma, and moving to thriving. And that's what we want. We want to take our anxiety. We want to go, wait a minute, what does all this mean? And go from surviving, where you're just using the strategies to kind of fix the moments, to thriving, where it's not controlling us.
Yeah, absolutely.
The strategies a lot of people use is in an attempt to control the anxiety, whether it's drugs, alcohol, whether it's anything excessive, OCD, food issues, all of that can very much is a strategy to try to resolve it. And it doesn't resolve it. It then adds another whole layer on top of it that doesn't work.
That you have to work through as well. Yeah, absolutely. So 100% bringing it to the conscious like mind is definitely addressing it. We spend, especially like you said in our earlier life, because that's the best way to do it, is just coping and managing it in terms of getting through it. And then once you're in a situation, that is exactly what happens the minute you're in a situation to actually address it. And I say 21 because, or even a bit earlier, maybe 19, 20, was because it's when I left home and when I was at uni, and you suddenly you take those triggers away and you have a space to look into yourself or explore what it is that makes you feel that way, and bring it into your conscience, as you said. And I think for just like transparency, it's not easy at all. Like it can be easy for us to sit here and be like, try this, do this, and come out the other side amazing. Like you will come out. Yeah, it's so not. So just sort of literally, I always say at the end of all of ours is transparency. Like, it's such a journey. Like, you have to hit that horribly rock bottom where you're like, oh my God, like I cannot do this. Like I just cannot do this, to then come out the other side and, address those things and work on them. Like, I spent so much of my time crying. Like, I always say that to people because I'm not really a massive crier now in terms of publicly. And I wasn't even then, but I I was a crier. I'm a huge crier. I think it's really important to express your emotions. And that was definitely part of my journey. I was like, I used crying as that was a coping technique. I was like, if I don't cry once a day, then something's wrong. You know, it's like in my head, it was something I had to do. And this is when it became like, again, toxic traits. But, you know, we move it. The point being, it is a journey and it's not easy. But if you want to improve in yourself, you have to do it. Bring it to the conscience and address it and challenge it and ask yourself questions, and then you might even be at a stage where you address the people or the situations or the things that were. So it's all part of that stepping, be it a piece of food that you address, a messy kitchen, or the person that's really caused you hurt. It's all part of that process, and it is a big old journey, a lifelong journey, but so worth it.
It is so worth it. And it is interesting because I've been, single, as you know, for a really long time now. And it wasn't until I actually started living with other people that, of course, some of those stories I was telling myself about what I meant when we had to resolve conflict, the anxiety ended up showing up again after so many years of thinking, oh, I'm totally awesome. I don't have
Yeah.
anxiety. I'm relaxed. Nobody's bothering me. Oh, yeah, wait a minute. And that happens to a lot of people. Like you're saying, well, you left your family and moved away, and because you're a grown up now, and that brought up a lot of stuff for you, and for a lot of people. And I know we're going to come to the end in a few minutes, so I just want to make sure we make this last point because it's kind of important. Is when you move into relationship with others, where your anxiety actually will show up more,
Yeah.
in ways, because then you're having to interrelate. It's going to bring up all sorts of stories about things, and I think human beings have a tendency to look outside themselves to blame that person for their anxiety. And that's when we really, really need to take responsibility for our own anxiety. And I tell that
Yeah.
to my, they go, okay, that totally sucks. No, 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 it's their fault. I'm not going to, and I go, no, 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 no. This is about your anxiety. You have to manage it.
Yeah.
And,
Because you'll never improve if you always blame other people. You'll always blame other people, and the only person that will lose out is you, because you just won't progress or get better with yourself, and you'll just always point the finger and you will be stagnant
and
forever.
you'll lose a lot of relationships, I would think. People would lose.
Yeah, because you're not managing it. Yeah. And like you said, it can always come back. I left my home, and no offense to my home, but it was one of the better choices. So I was able to express myself and explore my feelings, but I ended up back there for lockdown. And now that took me back 50 steps in terms of, I literally felt like a 12-year-old girl again, which was the weirdest experience. And a lot, and I very much did talk to my friends about it, like I say, talk about it, but it was really interesting to be knocked back to where you think you've made so much progress, and I still had, but it just reminded me of how much of a journey it is and how easily you can be put back in that situation. And it was a scary reminder of where I used to be, because I went straight back there within a few days, and it was terrifying. And I was like, I hate this. And it was horrible. And it wasn't anyone's fault. No one was doing anything, but the house and the environment and it was still so triggering for me, because I hadn't, like I said, exposing yourself to challenges. I hadn't exposed myself to living back there, despite all the work I'd done. I'd never lived at home again. So really, I'd never tested it. And I tested it and I was like, still got so far to go, which is fine.
Oh, appreciate you bringing that up, because that's exactly what has happened. Moving, being with a family again when I haven't been for 12 years, and
Yeah.
so that's a really, really good point. Is that we think that we've moved beyond stuff, but the triggers are still there. And the other thing you said, which I think is fantastic, for all you people that are listening and watching, this is a piece that I think is a great piece to leave with. Is when, like what Flora just said. She went home and she said she felt 12. Well, that's interesting. Yes, it does take courage to look honestly at our lives. You're right, Frankie, it does. And courage is one of those things that we all have to have, especially with anxiety. I actually even feel that, is it takes a lot of courage. And so that, I want to say to all the people that deal with this, and what a brilliant job you're doing, Flora, is how much courage I know it takes to do this, for you and Naida to, like, as you say, own it, and then to show up with the stories and let us hear, how you've managed it, and what's possible for the rest of us, and including myself. I'm still working on it, you guys. But the one point I think is really, that I'd really like to make, and it is important, is it's a really fun one, actually. So let's leave this fun one at the end. When you feel anxiety, okay, and you feel kind of that fear, or you're already in when you get out of the full-blown attack, or wherever you are in your journey, because it is a journey, and follow Flora, ask me for help, whatever, reach out to somebody that you love that, can support you. But the other thing is when you're feeling a little bit calmer is to think back on it and go, okay, wait a minute, where I felt it, feel it in your body and ask yourself, how old did you feel? So this is a really, really incredibly good tool. I use it with a lot of my clients. I use it with myself. I do have a 6-year-old self that can sometimes show up and need a
Yeah.
little TLC and love and attention. So, and it's not a foreign concept. It really is an incredible thing to think about. How old do you feel when you're upset? When you're in a conflict with somebody? How old are you feeling? Because that's the person that's showing up and is in control in that moment, not your adult self. So
Yeah.
learning that your adult self actually can handle this and look after that and that's how it actually heals. So, I mean, have you ever you said,
Yeah.
and I felt 12. So there was some information in there about being 12.
Well, that's it. It answers that exact question, which is when people are like, well, I've got anxiety, but where do I start? Well, the next time you experience your anxiety to a heightened level, yeah, absolutely. Ask yourself, where do I feel right now? What age do I feel? Or what situation do I feel? And go back to that. And then that's your starting point. Like that's your address. So then I now think, I go back to 12 and I think, right, what was happening then or post then? And I've noticed that because for me, that was the beginning of me being consciously aware that my life was fudged up a bit and like keeping it PC.
This is a technical term. Yeah, this is
Yeah.
a technical term.
But it allowed me to go back to the point where I knew in my head I was consciously aware that it was all going apart. I'd gone to friends' houses and realized my life is not like theirs, or I'd met other parents. I thought my parents aren't like that, or my siblings not. So you start to find holes in where may have caused your anxiety. So yeah, absolutely start with your age. And it's quite funny because some of you will be surprised how young you go.
I'm always 6. And one of my sons, and I won't mention any names, but one of my sons, when he was first married, and he's been married for, I think, almost 16 years now, but they were having an argument, and they were like in their 20 and 18. They were really young. And he goes, I feel like I'm 6 years old when I'm having an argument with her. And she goes, I think I'm only about 5. And so then I tell people, okay, your anxiety is like, this is historic. And it's your 5-year-old and your 6-year-old self or your 12-year-old self having this.
Yeah.
But we're just about to end and they will cut us off. And I don't want them to cut us off. This has been so amazing to talk.
Yeah, it's been great.
Thank you so much for sharing all of this great information. And I do really encourage everybody to follow Confidently Anxious. I can't even say it properly. Have some great tools and honestly, if you're feeling really anxious and you want somebody to reach out to them, reach out to me. I'm always happy to talk to somebody because I know what it's like. It's not very fun having a full-blown
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm always happy to share thoughts or stories because I know that actually makes you feel better when you hear that someone else has been through something. And sometimes we're just nosy people. We just like to know. But I'm all about sharing now. So absolutely, ask away.
You're not alone. And I think Flora figured that out actually pretty young because I used to get a lot of phone calls from the UK in Canada. And I think, it is really important to know that you're not alone and you've got people that are going through similar things and then can relate to what you're going through. So we're going to send you lots of love, or at least I am. I won't speak for you, Flora. That wouldn't be right. But I'm going to send you guys all my love. I so appreciate all of you being here. And I hope you'll come next week and see us. And I love you. Happy New Year. And this was a great way to start 2020.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Mia. It's been great. So thanks, guys.
Fun. Thanks a lot, everybody. We'll see you soon. Take care. Bye now.